Kia ora and welcome. I'm David Shanks and I'm New Zealand's Chief Censor. As Chief Censor, I am tasked with protecting the people of New Zealand, protecting them from media harms. A challenging task in the time of the internet, I'm sure you will agree. But despite what the title Censor might suggest to you, I'm actually tasked with protecting people's freedoms of speech, protecting them in a time when there are unparalleled challenges to people's rights and their dignity and their safety. As Chief Censor, I am tasked with finding a balance point, a balance between, for example, an adult's right to search for whatever content they may choose to view on the internet, balanced against a child's right not to have images of their body used and distributed on the internet, depriving them of their safety and rights to dignity. We live in an age where despots and dictators are learning to control the infosphere, learning to control the information that their citizens view and believe in. We live in an age where the battle for ideas and truth has never been more critical. We also live in an age where terrorists and extremists are looking to use the internet as a weapon. And my story is a story of one of the most extreme examples of exactly that happening. My story begins on the morning of Saturday, the 16th of March, 2019, when I went into the office at my home and looked around at the pictures drawn by my children on the wall before I sat down and pushed play on a video that had been sent to me by the New Zealand Department of Internal Affairs Digital Safety Unit. This was not something I would normally do. I normally would not view work that had been sent to me by enforcement agencies at my home. I have children. But this day was different. This was the day after a white nationalist extremist had got in his car loaded with weapons, ammunition and explosives, and had driven to two mosques in Christchurch and savagely attacked innocent people at prayer, at a time when they were seeking only safety and solace. They were murdered where they stood, huddled together. And this horrific event, this horrific attack, was not just a monumental tragedy, a senseless attack on the bodies and lives of those innocent people. It was also an attack on the people of my nation and the people around the world. This was a media harm event, the likes of which I'd never seen before. You see, this attacker, this terrorist, had planned all of these events to be broadcast live. He streamed his crimes directly to Facebook. His intention was clear. He knew that the algorithms of the social media platforms would amplify his message and spread the news of his act and his killings right across the internet. And that absolutely is what was happening. At the time I viewed the live stream, Facebook had already taken down nearly 1.5 million versions of it. All across the internet, digital platforms were desperately trying to remove it from their platforms, struggling and in many cases failing, because during this time there were advocates, supporters of these acts, operating out of sites such as 8chan, who were adjusting, moderating, editing the live stream, putting it back onto places like YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook to evade detection, to evade moderators, and spread its message of evil and hatred. So what was the end result of the social media algorithms amplifying this material, as well as the supporters changing it, adapting it, and reinserting it onto platforms around the net? No one knows. What I can tell you is that in my country, many, many people saw the live stream. And what I can also tell you is that many young people, teenagers, even children saw it, watched the killings before they even knew what it was that they were looking at, watching something that started out like a first-person shooter game and then morphed into something far more horrific. And as I looked at this material, I couldn't help but be struck by the similarities with what I was seeing with other terrorist material I had been called upon to review and assess as Chief Censor. I saw the branding on the killers' weapons. I heard the music coded to call out to white nationalist sympathisers. I saw the in-jokes in reference to memes designed to appeal to people following extremist forums on the internet. And I saw how this material, this wasn't news, this was a propaganda for death. This individual was carrying out these crimes in order to influence and inspire and call out to followers, to do the same. So just as I had with other terrorist promotional material, I made the call that this live stream video and the associated so-called manifesto, the Great Replacement, was objectionable, that is illegal under New Zealand law. Just as ISIS promotional documents and video recording their terrorist attacks and calling out to followers, this material, this propaganda for death, this was beyond the pale. It crossed the line under New Zealand law. And people queried this, as they had every right to do. I was asked, what about learning from this material? Isn't banning it meaning that we have no opportunity to learn from it? To which I was able to say, no, actually academics, researchers, investigators of all kinds can apply for and be granted leave to access to this material, record it, and write about it in order to learn. And others said to me, well, but I want to know, I want to read the writings of this killer in order to understand why he did these things. And my answer to them was, I understand that, but this document wasn't written for you. This document was specifically written to call out to those people on the path to extremist action. This document was specifically designed to push those people over the edge. And since those horrific events in Christchurch, we have seen a sequence of attacks around the world where young men espousing a white nationalist ideology have called out to each other, and in particular called out to the killer in Christchurch, saying how inspired they were by his acts. What we have seemed to have seen is a sequence of events suggesting that the attacker in Christchurch, to some degree at least, has achieved his goals of inspiring others to take up murderous intent. As I speak to you now, it is nearly 18 months on since the events in Christchurch, and what has changed? In many respects, the world has significantly changed. In New Zealand, we have banned the sorts of military-style weapons used by the attacker. We've seen Australia bring in legislation to give the E-Safety Commissioner powers to call on takedowns of violent extremist material. We've seen the GIFT-CT, the Global Internet Forum consortium of big digital players, come together to identify how they can hash and take down first-person shooter material of the kind that we saw coming out of Christchurch. And perhaps most significantly, we've seen the Christchurch Call, an initiative spearheaded by our Prime Minister and now taken up by 48 countries and most of the world's large global digital giants. A protocol and an accord designed to move forward, designed to develop a community of practice between states and between industry to ensure that violent extremism of this kind has no place on the internet. But in many respects, the road ahead looks harder than ever. I opened an app this morning designed for children and watched someone being shot to death. We live in a situation where we have a global pandemic and conspiracy theories and extremism is running riot on the internet. It is not my job to insulate our public from the fact that horrible things happen. There can be value in recording and calling out atrocities and crimes. The footage of the killing of George Floyd is an example of exactly that. But it is my job to see how discussions, theories, and exhortations to violence might manifest in the real world. In a pandemic environment, we are seeing theories proliferate that are manifesting in all kinds of concerning and unexpected ways. Theories that link 5G to the coronavirus, for example, appear to be correlated to a spate of attacks on cell towers in this country and around the world. What other influences and effects may come from unexpected places on the internet? The algorithms that are designed to increase engagement and time spent on the internet increasingly seem to be fueling hatred. We are seeing evidence of people encountering ideas, extremist views that are camouflaged or coded on mainstream platforms like Facebook and YouTube, where the organisers of sites may leave breadcrumbs for followers to track back down into the internet, into more extreme sites and channels, to Chan groups, closed groups where the hatred is more palpable, and ultimately to fully blown hate sites like the Daily Stormer, where people are calling outright for attacks and terrorist violence. And ultimately, some people will follow the rabbit hole all the way down to becoming activated radicals, terrorist extremists prepared to carry out attacks on an innocent populace. Addressing the problem of online extremism and hatred is no easy task, but it can be addressed through international collaboration, as foreshadowed by the Christchurch Call. Systems can be created that address people's fundamental human rights and protect their privacy, and from there you can build a system that is a virtuous cycle. Violent extremism and hatred on the internet is a wicked problem, but it is a problem we can respond to. Governments, industry, communities, technologists all can work together with shared purpose to turn the tide. For the lives of the 51 innocent people taken in Christchurch and the lives of so many others taken in senseless attacks since then, we must respond. We must respond, and we will. Thank you.